It's one of the most misunderstood topics in sexual health. Some people experience it, others wonder if it's even real, and for many there's confusion, curiosity, and sometimes even embarrassment around what's actually happening. Well, I'm Dr. Naraya Wolf, urologist and pelvic surgeon, and if you've ever had questions about your body's responses during intimacy, or if you're trying to understand what's normal and what's not, stay with us. We're here to help you understand your urological health with clarity, compassion, and without judgment. Today we're talking about squirting. What exactly is this fluid? Where does it come from? And perhaps the question on everyone's mind, is it urine or is it something else entirely? Let's walk through this together, step by step, so you can understand what's happening in your body with confidence. So, what is squirting? In simple terms, it's the release of fluid, often a noticeable amount, from the urethral opening. During sexual arousal or climax, this fluid is typically clear, doesn't have a strong odor, and for some people, it happens almost every time. For others, it's rare or never occurs at all. And here's what's important to know. Both experiences are completely normal. Now, if you've ever researched this online, you've probably seen wildly different explanations. Some sources say it's a special sexual fluid, others claim it's just urine, and still others suggest it's a mix of both. So it's no wonder people feel confused. The truth is, the medical community is still learning about this. We don't have all the answers yet, but what we do know comes from anatomy, small clinical studies, and a growing understanding of how the body responds during intimacy. Before we can understand what squirting is, we need to talk about the structures involved, because the anatomy here is fascinating, and it holds the key to making sense of what's happening. Let's start with the urethra. This is the tube that carries urine from your bladder to the outside of your body. In people with vulvas, it sits just above the vaginal opening. Now here's where it gets interesting. Tucked underneath the urethra are small duct-like structures called the Skene's glands. You might not have heard of them, but they're incredibly important in this conversation. These glands are what we call homologous to the male prostate. That's a fancy way of saying they develop from the same embryonic tissue. In fact, when we examine these glands under a microscope, we find something called PSA, prostate-specific antigen, the same substance found in male prostates. So in many ways, the Skene's glands function like a female prostate. They produce small amounts of fluid, and they play a role in sexual response. Next, let's talk about the clitoris. Most people only see the small visible part, the glands, but the clitoris is actually much larger. It extends deep into the pelvis, with legs that wrap around the vaginal opening. It's made of erectile tissue, just like the penis, and it engorges with blood during arousal. Here's something remarkable. The clitoris is the only organ in the entire human body that exists purely for pleasure. That's it. No other function. Just sensation and enjoyment. Now, what happens during sexual arousal? As arousal builds, several things occur. The vaginal walls release natural lubrication, the clitoris, becomes engorged. Blood flow increases throughout the pelvic region, and those Skene's glands, they begin filling with fluid. When climax occurs, the pelvic floor muscles contract strongly, and it's believed that this contraction, combined with pressure from the engorged clitoris and surrounding tissues, causes fluid to be released from the Skene's glands. In some people, this release is small, just a few drops. In others, it's a much larger volume. And that's where the bladder comes into the picture. Here's the thing, the Skene's glands are tiny. When we measure them, they weigh somewhere between 2.6 and 5.2 grams. Compare that to the male prostate, which averages around 23 grams, about 5 times larger. And even in men, the prostate only contributes about 1/3 of the volume in ejaculate. The rest comes from other glands. So if the Skene's glands are that small, where is all this fluid coming from during squirting? The most likely answer is the bladder. Now, before you feel embarrassed or confused, let me explain what we know and what we don't. Researchers have conducted small studies trying to answer this exact question. In one study, scientists analyzed the chemical composition of squirting fluid. What they found was fascinating. The fluid contained PSA, which confirmed that at least some of it came from the Skene's glands. But the fluid also resembled very diluted urine. It wasn't concentrated like normal urine, it was much clearer, lighter, and didn't have the typical odor or chemical markers you'd expect. Another study used ultrasound imaging. Participants had their bladders scanned before sexual activity, and there was a small amount of fluid visible. After squirting occurred, the bladder was scanned again, and the fluid was gone. In yet another trial, researchers introduced a harmless blue dye into the bladder before sexual activity. When the participants squirted, the fluid that was released had a blue tint. So on the surface, it seems pretty clear the fluid is coming from the bladder. But here's where it gets more nuanced. Many people who squirt regularly have shared something interesting. They empty their bladder right before sex. So how can the fluid still be there? One theory involves the body's response to arousal. During sexual activity, your heart rate increases, your blood pressure rises, and your body releases a cascade of hormones. Some researchers believe this triggers the kidneys to filter fluid more quickly, producing a very dilute form of urine that collects rapidly in the bladder, clear, odorless, and chemically different from regular urine. There's also the question of what some call coital incontinence, involuntary urine leakage, during sex. For some people, this might be part of what's happening, for others it's not. And then there are the personal stories. I've had viewers tell me they take medications that turn their urine bright orange or blue, like phenazopyridine or methylene blue, and yet when they squirt, the fluid is completely clear. That suggests something more complex is happening than simple urine release. So, is squirting just urine? Not exactly. Is it coming from the bladder? Likely, yes, at least in part. Is it also being influenced by the skin's glands, hormonal changes, and the body's unique response to pleasure? Absolutely. Here's what I want you to take away from this. Squirting is a natural variation in sexual response. Some people experience it, some don't, and both are completely normal. If you squirt and you've ever felt embarrassed or worried that something was wrong, I want to reassure you. Your body is functioning exactly as it's designed to. There's no shame in how your body responds to pleasure, and if you've never experienced squirting, that's perfectly normal too. It doesn't mean you're missing out, and it doesn't reflect on your ability to experience intimacy or satisfaction. What matters most is understanding your body, communicating openly with your partner, and embracing your own experience without comparison or judgment. If you're curious about how people actually feel about squirting, whether they love it, feel indifferent, or even find it inconvenient, I've covered that in another video where we explore the emotional side of this topic. I'll link that for you. And as always, if you ever have concerns about your sexual health, bladder function, or anything that feels uncertain, reach out to a urologist. We're here to listen, support, and help you feel confident in your own body. Thank you for being here. Take gentle care of yourself because you're absolutely worth it.